Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday, October 14th. This is Spartan News. I'm the Spartan. This is day 598 of Vladimir Putin's 3-day military operation. He's running slightly over time. Do forgive him. So this was going to be a short but interesting one today. I'm hoping to spark some controversy. No, I'm just going to basically tell you what I think game changers are and what I think a new game changer is going to be after we review the catastrophic Russian losses for the last 24 hours. Not quite as bad as the previous 72, but still not great. So, to get started, over the last 24 hours, Russia has lost 970 combat troops, 9 tanks, which is low. 970 troops obviously is high, and seems to be the norm for the last week, just under a week, 4 days. But 9 tanks is a little lower. I literally think that the tanks that they spent trying to take Avdiivka, 2 years straight they've been trying to take Avdiivka, but I think they might be running low on tanks, so they just basically said enough is enough, and they've sort of retrenched. 24 APVs, armored personnel vehicles. That includes MLRS, or that includes IFVs, BTRs, etc. Kind of par for the course. 26 artillery systems, slightly on the high side. It's a really good number. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 1 aircraft, which is fantastic, and 1 UAV. Now, sometimes people will question. First of all, I wanted to point out the amount of troops that Russia lost in the last 4 days, approximately, is 3,810. That is basically 4.5 old BTGs, battalion tactical groups, that they used to run. That is a lot of people, 3,800. And I would say 3/4 of that has been around Avdiivka. So some people will question the verified losses of Russian equipment, and basically saying it's not possible, it's skewed, the Ukrainians are losing as much or more. So we no longer have Oryx, but we do have somebody I think who's even better, which is Andrew Perpetua, who basically goes through maps and visually confirms what he can as far as Russian losses. I'm not going to go through this because it is quite extensive, but the red is the Russian losses that Andrew was able to confirm over the last 24 hours on maps, videos, satellite pictures, not really satellite pictures, but and the blue is Ukrainian. So you can see you've got Urals and Kamaz and BMPs and etc. Mr. S right there. There's the TOS that we saw destroyed. Anytime you want to check things out, and Andrew doesn't make this stuff up out of whole cloth. He's got basically verified proof of these particular losses, and so you can, and for everything that we see, there's many that we don't see, right? There's many videos that the Ukrainians just don't pass on anymore because it's just yet another drone video. It's just yet another artillery strike, whatever. So we don't see a lot of the items kit being taken out that is actually being taken out. So if there's 30 something on here, yeah, could there be another 60 to 90 out there that just didn't get a video for whatever reason, or a snapshot? Yes, 100%. So anyways, Andrew Perpetua, he's got a great map, updates, and he also does a great amount of work, basically digging deep into all of this sort of visually verified information. So he's a true gem and adds a ton of value to a lot of creators out there like myself. So going on to the I wanted to cover off this too. So as many of you maybe remember, at the start of the war, the Russians were dropping upwards of 60,000 shells a day. 100, what are they? I think 120 millimeter artillery shells primarily, I believe, is the Russians. And anyways, so they had way more artillery pieces. They had millions and millions and millions of Soviet era and beyond artillery rounds, and they were basically just annihilating cities like Melitopol, Mariupol, Kharkiv, Kherson, etc., and basically just carpet bombing them with tens of thousands of shells a day, and thinking that because it worked in Chechnya, because it worked in Georgia, etc., that they were just going to basically bomb the Ukrainians into submission, and there was no rhyme or reason, and they're so inaccurate that it would take 10 to 20 Russian shells to have the effectiveness of one Ukrainian shell. And the Ukrainians knew that as well. One, they couldn't match them shell for shell. Two, they were more accurate. And three, they had to be more careful with their shells. So throughout the war, the Russians have basically been depleting their stockpile of shells, and on top of that, they've also been losing artillery pieces at an alarming rate that's actually increasing. 800, 900 a month. And then at the same time, the Ukrainians, you can see here, it was like 4,000 shells a day versus 63,000. Not really fair. But those 4,000 shells, if they were 10 times more accurate, would have the effectiveness of about 40,000 shells to 63,000. So the Russians still had them outgunned, outdamaged, etc. But the Ukrainians were doing a lot of good work with what they had. And then as you see here, slowly but surely over time, like up and down a little bit, up and whatever, the Ukrainians have been ramping up the amount of shells that they have been able to fire on a daily basis, to the point where they're at 6,000 to 7,000 shells a day. Well, these shells being 10 times at least more accurate than, if not more. I mean, when you're talking about an Excalibur has like a 99% hit rate or close to it, and a CEP, which is circular area probable of what it's going to hit, of like 3 meters. So when you have an Excalibur round that's going to hit a tank basically every time you fire 100 Excalibur tank rounds at 100 tanks, 99 of those tanks are going away. The Russians could fire 100 rounds at 2 tanks and maybe hit one of them. So all that being said, the Russians' numbers have depleted from a shell capacity, from a shell quality standpoint, from banana barrels on their howitzers to just the number of howitzers and shells that they have, all the way down 28, 20, 12, and now to 7. So the Ukrainians over the last month have fired on average 9,000 shells per day. The Russians have fired 7. So the Russians are firing 7,000 shells per day, but they're 10 times at least less accurate than the Ukrainians. So you can either say that it's like they've fired 700 shells in a day, or you can say that the 9,000 that the Ukrainians fired is equal to 90,000. 90,000 versus 7,000. So the worm has turned completely. And I think it's only going to go up from there, because if you've seen the quality of the ammunition being sent to the Russians, the lack of artillery, they've basically stripped all the artillery barrels off of all of their in-storage artillery pieces in Russia. We've seen that happen in numerous satellite photos, to the point where basically they've cannibalized anything that's usable out there, and they don't have the capacity to produce Mr. S's and Mr. B's and all that sort of stuff on a daily basis. They might be able to still produce some, but they cannot keep up with what they're losing. They're losing 800 to 900 a month. They're not producing 800 to 900 a month. I've seen no credible sources that they're producing any. I assume they must be, but it's so minimal that it's not even being reported by anybody. So congratulations to the Ukrainians, congratulations to the Western support. And the worm has turned, and let's hope that this continues, that we continue to see a ramp up of the Ukrainian shells and a decrease in the Russian shells. Artillery is the god of war, and it is the rail and artillery are the two backbones of the Russian military. They've lost their ability to effectively use rail, and they've basically lost their advantage in artillery. So as General Milley said a few months ago, Russia's already lost, they just don't know it yet. So going on to the thumbnail. It basically said what was a game changer coming to Ukraine, which is the GLSDB precision bombs, which was ground launched small diameter bombs. So a lot of you might be familiar with these. They call this a combination, basically coming together of Saab and Boeing. It's actually more than that. But basically, what the GLSDB is, it's what you would consider a dumb bomb combined with a advanced GPS guidance kit, combined with a wing fin attachments that go onto it to basically help it be steered where it needs to go based on the smart onboard guidance system, as well as the coordinates that have been put into it. It's had a rocket slapped onto the back of it as well, obviously to give it propulsion. So first ground launch small diameter bombs will be delivered to Ukraine this winter, citing an official at Boeing. Global Defense Report citing an official at Boeing. We're on track to deliver in accordance with the government timeline, said Jim Jerry, Senior Director of Business Development, blah, 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 Weapons Systems at Boeing, quoted. Now, originally these were touted and basically brought out, shown to the public last February, and said they would be, working on them, putting them all together, and then when we heard rumors they were going to be delayed, then we heard rumors that every single one of the rockets that was basically going onto the back of these bombs, these dumb bombs, needed to be inspected to ensure that there was no cracks in them. They were close to end of life, that sort of thing, and they were going to be delayed, etc. And then it just became a non-event, a non-story, and people just said, well, maybe in the spring of 2024, who knows? So now it is confirmed. Now it's still not an exact date. And typically they don't tell you when a new weapon system is going in country for sure. But soon is the key word. The mentioned timeline might have been drawn by Pentagon's Deputy Assistant Secretary Laura Cooper previously this summer. The earliest is this fall, she assured during a meeting She assessed during a meeting in the U.S. Congress. Initially, the provision of the GLSDBs was announced in early February 2023. The bombs were sponsored under the USAI program, which meant that they had to be produced first instead of going straight from the Pentagon storage. The delay was connected to the need to crank up the production. As a reminder, GLSDB is a weapon designed jointly by Boeing and Saab. They combine the M26 rocket engine with the GBU-38 dumb bomb, turning it into a precision-guided ground-launched missile. So you basically have your dumb bomb, your M26 rocket, your adapter to attach the two, and then you put your wing kit on. These bombs can be deployed by HIMARS M220 and M270 self-propelled launchers and their variant known as Mars 11. So the Mars is the tracked, HIMARS obviously is the wheeled. The Mars 2 is produced and or deployed by Germany and France. All the mentioned are currently in service with the armed forces of Ukraine. But on top of that, it's not just the HIMARS and Mars launchers. The GLSDBs actually come with their own portable launchers as well, so you're not just tied to these bad boys. At the moment, these rocket systems only have one type of missile to use. The Gimlers at the moment, these particular the HIMARS and the Mars only have one type of missile to use. The Gimlers with an attack range of 70 kilometers. On the other hand, the GLSDB has a range of 150 kilometers, basically doubling the distance that targets can be struck. And to be clear, the HIMARS is actually more than 70. I've seen an 85 kilometer confirmed hit by HIMARS, so who knows what their actual max distance is, but basically the GLSDB is doubling the distance that they can strike. This will not only make HIMARS M270 twice as deadly, but also improve the safety, since there will be fewer times that they have to approach the front lines. So if you have a target that's 70 kilometers deep inside and it's a high value target, you might have to bring a HIMARS right up close to the border, and then all of a sudden it's at risk of being struck by artillery, lancets, etc. Whereas if you have an 80 kilometer target now, using GLSDB, you'll be able to strike it whilst keeping your launcher 70 kilometers or 60 kilometers safely inside of your territorial borders, which is fantastic. Worth noting, while GLSDB debate has been in full swing in the U.S., Ukraine got Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles from the United Kingdom and France. Speaking at Congress, even Laura Cooper mentioned them as having a larger range and showing good results. With a range of over 250 kilometers, Storm Shadows have indeed proven themselves in attacks on Crimea, most notably when they destroyed the Russia Rostov-on-Don submarine and reportedly were used to strike the Black Sea Fleet headquarters. Don't forget the Minsk landing ship. However, they cannot replace the 150 GLSDB or 300 kilometer ATACMs, primarily because the Russians have anti-aircraft systems able to counter Storm Shadow cruise missiles. It's kind of true, kind of not. The Storm Shadow can be struck. At the same time, the Storm Shadow also can have basically a unique approach to its target, as far as like it doesn't have to just go on a basically straight ballistic arc line. In contrast, ballistic trajectory makes the GLSD impossible to intercept by air defense systems without anti-missile capability, and Russians are very short on these. So there you go. So I wanted to point out one other thing on this. So the other companies that were involved are called out here as well, but Boeing, in partnership with Saab, developed the interstage adapter to connect the SDB to the M26 rocket, basically the dumb bomb to the rocket. Also providing expertise are two Norwegian companies, Nammo, the booster rocket, and Nordic Shelter, the launchers. The advantage of the M26 is that there is an abundant stockpile of these rockets. This is very important. Production of these rockets ceased in 2001 when 506,000 rockets had been produced. As of 2004, 439,000 plus still remained. By 2007, the Army was paying to destroy them. The original ordnance carried by the M26 did not meet the terms of the Convention of Cluster Munitions. Although the GLSDB can be launched by either MLRS or HIMARS, it also comes with its own launcher. So basically, I'm not going to go into too much more detail on that as far as the specs, etc., but it's available here on Wikipedia. But the point being is that they have well in excess of 300 to 350,000 of these booster rockets still available that have not been decommissioned or destroyed or past their end of life. And they have almost an unlimited amount of dumb bombs to go with it. So it's basically just pairing the two together, putting the kits on them, and then getting them in country. And so there are hundreds of thousands, you can say safely 300 to 350,000 potential GLSDBs. These things are going to be extremely accurate, extremely precise, and extremely long distance. How long distance? So here is the distance used of coverage for the Patriot missile system, which is 160 kilometers. So roughly matches the distance that the GLSDBs supposedly can fly. You also have to be aware too that the GLSDBs, they have the booster rocket They have the ability to have a ballistic arc. They have the wing kits, and they're able to basically glide and steer themselves. So the max range can also depend on the elevation where they're fired from, the type of flight path that it takes, the weather conditions, etc. Going into headwinds, being able to glide, the terrain, downhill, etc. So, but this is roughly the distance that you can see that it can strike. So while a M777, for example, would be half of this, or way less than half of this, a quarter to a third of this. HIMARS would be half of this circle. This is basically the distance that this particular weapon system would be able to strike. So basically, you can see if you put it even a safe distance away, like let's say right there, it's basically able to strike almost every portion of occupied territory. You go back down to Kherson, you can see it can strike all of the Kherson Oblast, and all the way into northern Crimea. You get it down here. Again, you can get into northwestern Crimea, put it over here in Odessa. It can still get over to the Kinburn Spit, etc. So this to me is going to be a game changer. What do I think the game changers are or have been in the past? I have basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 previous what I would call game changers. And I'm adding GLSDB to it to be the 7th once it arrives. And that's probably the first time I've said a game changer is a game changer before it's even arrived. The first game changer, I've got 6 previous ones. The first game changer was the Bayraktar. Why? Predominantly, it gave a lot of psyops and it gave a lot of confidence to the Ukrainians that they had a weapon system that was domestically available, supported, produced, partially produced, etc. That was able to stop some columns from advancing, that was able to do some real damage and gave some really good videos, created some songs, memes, etc., and gave the Ukrainians a wealth of confidence that they really maybe didn't have at that time when in February, March, and April when they needed some wins. So I think the Bayraktar kind of had this sort of death from above thing going for it, and basically it was a chest pumper and an ego boost. So to me, I think that was a game changer and gave the Ukrainians something to lean on until more tangible wins and help and assets arrived. The second one, the second game changer for me, was bringing in the 155 millimeter howitzer systems, both SPGs. The M777 was, I think, the first one before the SPGs got going, and that basically started to put the Ukrainians at parity with the Russians. So you had, the ability to strike 35 to 40 kilometers deep into Russian territory, which basically equaled or exceeded a lot of the Russian artillery systems and gave the Ukrainians a chance to kind of fight on their own 2 feet. After that, the serious game changer that came in the late fall of last year summer of last year, I believe it was the HIMARS. Obviously, HIMARS speaks for itself. It gave an 80-kilometer range. It allowed the Ukrainians to instantly wipe out millions and millions of tons of ammunition, ground lines of communication, command and control centers, Russian generals, etc., and it truly turned the tide of the war. So that was the sort of gold standard for the game changers. The next 2, one was the Storm Shadow and Scalp. This is in the wrong order, by the way, but Storm Shadow and Scalp definitely gave them the ability to reach out and touch the Russians at an exceptionally long distance. Bridges, command and control, high-value targets, etc., with devastating impacts. And the last known one is drones. Air and sea. Observation drones, loitering drones that drop munitions, FPV drones, surface drones, and now potentially underwater drones that are striking ships. Those are game changers to the point where they've defeated the Black Sea Fleet without actually having a fleet of their own. And then the last one will be the GLSDB, which I think is basically due to the sheer number of them that are going to be available, the distance that they can reach, the accuracy that they can reach, the cheapness of them. Put all those things together, I think they're going to basically decimate what's left of the Russian battlefield. So with that, I wanted to leave you with a very cool video to remind you of the sales pitch and the potential of these GLSDBs. There you go. Watch it hang a right. This is no joke. With those wing kits, it'll be able to turn around mountains. Moving targets. Flying to bridges, in tunnel, in caves.
Everyone needs to have this tool
There you
to
go.
protect their home and their
Up
loved
it easy. So that's it. There's your losses for the day and the next game changer on the horizon, in my opinion. If you agree with this or don't, feel free to comment, like, subscribe, share, and have a great day. Slava Ukraini.